Okay, I'm going to show you how to draw a construction detail which includes a strip foundation with a ground bearing solid concrete ground floor. It's going to end up looking something like this, but we're going to start off with a blank sheet of paper, and the equipment that we're going to use, simply a scale rule, a pencil, a pair of set squares, and I'm going to use an ink pen later on just to ink in to make it clearer to view. It's also good to have a decent eraser to hand just to rub out pencil guidelines and so on. So we're going to start by very simply drawing a horizontal line which is going to represent ground floor level. Now, set squares come in very handy for something like this because it's quickly possible to draw a nice horizontal line which is perpendicular to the edge of the sheet of paper. So we can simply line up the edge of the set square with the edge of the paper there, and by sliding the set square up and down we can very easily draw a nice straight horizontal line. So that line effectively represents ground level. Now, for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to assume a strip foundation 500 millimeters wide. So we're going to draw this to a scale of 1 to 10. So using our scale rule, we simply mark off one edge of the foundation there, and 500 millimeters wide we mark another point there. We can now draw two vertical lines. Again, we line up our set squares on the horizontal line, we slide the set squares up, draw a horizontal line down there, another horizontal line there, and that's the width of our foundation. The base of the foundation, let's say, is going to be 1200 millimeters below ground level. So we scale down 1200 millimeters. Doesn't matter that I've slightly missed the line there, but we just draw a line across there. Again, using our set squares to ensure that we keep our lines at right angles. Line up that edge there, slide it down the other scale rule, draw a horizontal line across there. That is now 1200 millimeters below ground level. And if you just want to make sure that those lines line up, then across there, and just complete that line there. So we've now got ground level there, the base of our foundation 1200 millimeters below ground level, and the lines of a strip foundation 500 millimeters wide. So next I'm going to just mark off the center line of that foundation, 250 millimeters. There's our center point, and I'm going to assume that sitting on this foundation will be a cavity wall comprising an outer leaf of brickwork, which will be 102.5 millimeters thick, a 100 millimeter cavity, and an inner leaf of blockwork 100 millimeters thick. So the cavity will obviously be right at the center. It's going to be 100 millimeters wide, so the width of the cavity is going to be there and there. The outer leaf is going to be 102.5. We're not going to be able to draw that accurately, so it's going to be just a tad over 100 millimeters, and the inner leaf is going to be 100 millimeters, so we can mark off that there. So we can now draw vertical lines representing the thicknesses of the various leaves of the cavity wall. So again, we line up the set squares, slide them up, and draw a vertical line up there, there, there. If you're thinking I'm slightly missing my points a little bit, missing the edges, you're probably right. It's because of the position of the camera. I can't actually lean properly over the sheet, and so it's actually quite difficult for me to see what I'm doing. But I'm just going to rub out those lines in between the leaves of the wall. Okay, now I've extended the lines of the cavity wall below ground level, and that's because the top of our strip foundation will actually stop below ground level, and I'm going to, for the purposes of this exercise, I'm going to stop it 225 mil below ground level. So if we mark off 225 mil there, draw another horizontal line to represent the top of our strip foundation, and I'm going to coincide that with a line across there which represents the area of topsoil which will have been stripped from the surface. If you recall, we said that the top 150 to 300 millimeters of soil on a typical greenfield site would be removed from the site as being unsuitable for building. So I've said that, let's say 225 mil is stripped. That's that thickness there. So let's add in the courses for our brickwork and blockwork. Now this is actually quite difficult to show you easily, but each course of brickwork is a total of 75 mil deep, and that's made up of a 10 mil bed of mortar and a 65 mil deep brickwork. So it's a little bit fiddly, but we can actually quite accurately at this scale mark off 10 mil and 65 mil. 10 mil, 65, 10, 65, and so on up. If you just bear with me while I quickly mark off these. It's a little bit tiresome having to do this, but as I say, it does enable us to accurately represent the construction much more effectively than simply showing vertical lines. We can also show the horizontal courses, so I think at a scale of 1 to 10 it's perfectly reasonable to include those. Okay. I'm going to add in the courses now. We've got 1, 2, 3 courses below ground level. We will extend our brickwork up to DPC level, which has to be a minimum of 150 mil above ground level, so that would take us to that point there, and then we'll just show a few courses above DPC level. Now the courses on the inner leaf will be blockwork, and although we haven't yet covered external walls, I can tell you that blockwork courses are, a single course of blockwork is equivalent to 3 courses of brickwork. However, to maintain our course heights, I'm going to suggest that the bottom 2 courses of the inner leaf are actually in brickwork rather than blockwork. So I hope it will become clear what I'm doing in a moment. So I'm going to show the courses there and there. Let's say it's a little bit tedious this, but it should become clear once I've done it. Slipped a little bit there. And our bottom bed joint there. So we've got 2 courses of brickwork on the inner leaf. That's up to DPC level. Bed joint there. Now I'm only going to include courses on the outer leaf here because the outer leaf is brickwork, whereas the inner leaf is now blockwork. And I'll just add in a couple more courses above DPC level. Okay, so we've now got an outer leaf of brickwork and an inner leaf. There's 2 courses of blockwork there and a couple of base courses of brickwork, just to ensure that the course heights are nice and even. I'm now going to rub out some of these lines here just to make it a little bit clearer. Okay. From the point at which we strip the topsoil, I'm now going to add in a bed of hardcore, and I'm going to say that that bed of hardcore is 125mm deep and has got a 25mm blinding on top of it. So in total it's going to be 150mm made up of 25mm blinding and 125mm of hardcore. So we can draw in another horizontal line across there, like so, and there. Sitting on top of that we will have the damp-proof membrane. Now the damp-proof membrane needs to lap with the damp-proof course in the walls. Now damp-proof membranes and indeed the damp-proof course are very thin, and we're not going to be able to accurately show the thickness of them. However, we can simply indicate the presence of the damp-proof course and the damp-proof membrane by a broken line. So I'm going to run a broken line through the middle of that course of or that bed joint there. So there's our DPC in the walls, and that laps with the damp-proof membrane, which will run up the wall there, and then across the top of the blinding to the hardcore. And the blinding actually provides a nice smooth surface for the damp-proof membrane and avoids the possibility of the damp-proof membrane being punctured as people walk around on the surface of it. So there's our damp-proof membrane. On top of that I'm going to put 70mm thick of insulation. So again we can draw in a horizontal line which actually coincides roughly with our ground level line. So I'll just draw in that line across there. We need to prevent a thermal bridge at the perimeter of the wall, so we should also have an upstand of insulation. I'm going to put 25mm of insulation in at the edge and draw a vertical line to represent the insulation coming up here. And then I'm going to put in the concrete slab. I'm going to put in 100mm thick concrete slab. So I'll mark off 100mm there. And then there's going to be a 50mm screed sitting on top of that. So that takes us up to that point there. So 2 more horizontal lines. Takes us across to there. And there. So in actual fact we've now got in virtually all of our lines. We need to add in a couple of other items in between the outer leaf and the inner leaf of the cavity wall below ground level. It's normal practice to actually fill that section below ground level with a mix of very lean concrete, really just a mixture of sand and cement. So we can just put in a line going across there. It's normal to just slope that upper surface of that concrete fill outwards, so if any moisture gets into the cavity it's naturally drained away at ground level. And we're also going to put in a detail to show the hatching for the hardcore. There's lots of different ways, or several different ways of showing hardcore, but one of the simplest ways of showing it is just to do a series of 45-degree lines, diagonal lines in effect, like this. So we'll run a line up like that, and then from that point downwards like so. Okay, at that point there I'm going to just draw a very rough vertical line coming down there, and everything to the right of that line I'm now actually going to rub out. That's going to leave me some space to add in some annotations. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink in the detail. I'm actually just going to do it freehand to save a little bit of time, but if you're not used to using ink, then you may just want to leave it in pencil, but go over it with a heavier pencil, but this will make it clearer for you to see. So here's our strip foundation. Top of the strip foundation is 225mm below ground level. The graphical symbol to indicate concrete may appear a little bit random, but it simply indicates a mixture of coarse aggregate, the larger stones, and then fine aggregate. And that would be understood in most situations as representing concrete. As I say, it may look a little bit random. For indicating the existence of soil, there is a standard hatching which simply looks like that. We can add some in down there. and people just can identify the fact that that's the soil beneath our detail. Our wall can now go in. We'll just take it from that point there. The outer leaf in brickwork. Brickwork is 102.5 millimeters thick. We can show our 10mm thick courses like so. I say apologies if this seems rather crude, but I'm going to have to do it freehand, otherwise I'll be here all day doing it using a scale rule. And the inner leaf of blockwork, and the blockwork courses are the same size as 3 courses of brickwork. But remember, at the base of this we've got 2 courses of brickwork, just to ensure that the courses line up. Our hardcore bed across there like that, the hatching for that, there's our hardcore, a sand blinding on top of that, which we'll just put in some dots to indicate that it's a granular material. We'll put in our DPC running through there and there. The DPC does not run across the cavity. It laps with the DPM, which in turn runs down the wall and across the top of the blinding to the hardcore bed. Remember that this is only one possible detail. There are lots of other arrangements for ground floors. This is just one possible detail. There's our insulation upstand at the edge, and the layer of insulation in the floor. The symbol for indicating insulation, again there are several, but this is a common one, which you might find quite difficult to draw if you've never done it before. And up the wall as well. Then our concrete slab, 100 millimeters thick, and the screed sitting on top of that. We'll use the same symbol here for concrete to indicate the concrete slab. And the sand and cement screed, which is literally just comprised of fine material, we'll just use some dots to indicate that. And in terms of the drawing, that's pretty much it. Sorry, I've got to add in that fill to the cavity below ground level. But that's pretty much as it would appear. I'm going to quickly add in some labels. The dimension for our foundation, the foundation we said was 1200 below ground level. I'll just put GL, a line across there, and that's the key dimension. It's not the depth of the foundation concrete itself, it's the depth of the base of the foundation below ground level. So ground level is represented there. We can show our DPC there. The outer leaf in brickwork, and that's 102.5. we've got a 100 mm cavity, and an inner leaf of blockwork, which is 100 mm. We've got some edge insulation there, when you're adding labels you might want to use guidelines. I'm quite used to adding annotations so I can do it reasonably neatly, although it's not as neat as I would like because I am doing it rather hurriedly. That's our screed, which is 50 mm thick. Our concrete slab, which is 100 mm thick. Insulation, .70 mm thick. A damp-proof membrane, a 25 mm blinding, and a hardcore bed of 125. Now ideally we should also add in some more sort of specifications to those labels, indicating the mix of the concrete, the type of the insulation, thicknesses, materials used and so on. But just for speed really, I've just done a very quick detail, but that shows you the basic processes of producing a ground floor detail, which is a section through the base of an external wall, its foundation and its junction with the ground floor. So I hope that's explained it clearly.